Hey, if you're watching the replay, I'm just going to wait for people to get on board. This is an impromptu 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon live stream. In the first comment, I will put a timestamp to where the content begins. So I'm going to just cover a little bit of background story, and then I'm going to get into a little bit of Q&A. And there you go. So, hey, whoever is online, say hello and let me know if you can hear me. Hey, Loki, how are ya? Can you hear me? Let me know. Yeah. So, impromptu. Frite, hello, Frite, how are you? Hope everything is well. Hail, Stef. Nanu. Hologram nunchuck. There we go. So that's proof of your nerd. If you can do a Vulcan, you can do a double Vulcan without hesitation. That's pure nerd skill sets, right? Anyway, audio is good. All right, so pulling back, old mic, way back. I've had this mic for 15 years. I think I'll try it out. Hello, we can hear you. Good. Hello, greetings from Kenya. Very cool, loud and clear. Nixon, how are you? Cool. Hey there, Dragon. Yeah, all right, so we're getting on board. So you're trying to say that StudioWeb never became Studio Ruby Web? Indeed. I was going through one of my GitHub repos, and I found something I thought you guys would find interesting. So let me just pop that open. Boom. So this is going back 2015 when we were thinking about the initial rewrite of StudioWeb. I said, hey, one of my guys said, hey, why don't we do it Rails? So as you can see, Ruby Rails StudioWeb 3, and you can see the dates. 6 years ago, we started looking at that. Anyhow, so there you go. It's a little sneak peek of what the discussion is going to be. I figured I might freak some of you out. Dublin, Ireland. Ah, yes. I spent some time in Dublin. Good place, good stop, good spot. Dublin kind of reminds me of Montreal, kind of a smaller version of Montreal. Can you please talk about embedded systems? What do you want me to talk about? Where's the plant? It's right there, in fact. I got to move it behind me. Yeah. Hey, Sear Porky. Back when I was a kid, the Porky's was one of those video films that we loved to watch as teenagers. I am very good, Andy. Thank you very much. Dublin, Ireland. Where's the plant? Hey, Stef, I'm doing good. Looking good. Big Stefan. There we go. Yeah, I cut my hair. Yeah, I was trying to grow my hair long, and then it was just too uncomfortable. So I pulled out my clippers, and away we go. Can you tell us some history in Ruby? Nice story from a wizard. All right, so what's going on, guys? Yeah, hello. Jakub says, hola, hello. So I'm going to try to wait for about 75 people to show up, and then we'll jump into it. Let's see if I can up the exposure just a little bit. All right, there we go. Okay, so how are we doing here? So I'm waiting for about 75 plus people to show up, then I'll just jump into it. It's a quick little story about Ruby and Rails and StudioWeb. I thought you guys might find it interesting. I get that a lot. Much love from India, buddy. Well, thanks for watching from India. It's one place I want to visit, actually, for sure. Nestor Peralta Vargas, Stef, what do you think about affiliate marketing and WordPress? Well, if you got a good audience and you like creating content, you like communicating with people, affiliate marketing can be very, very profitable. There's no question about that. When you are approaching any type of advertising or marketing, do it from a perspective of your honest opinion. So for example, I put out a couple ads recently and I decided I refuse, I get ad requests every week. Every week I refuse 99%, 90%, 99%. Anyway, I refuse quite a bit. And the ones I put up, they serve two purposes. A, I think that you guys might be interested in it, and B, um, there might be some value in it. And I don't evaluate all the products. I take a quick look. I say, okay, it fits, kind of makes sense. Up to you to decide whether or not you like it. So there's a lot of stuff like, I won't get into the specific products, but they've approached me and I said, no, I don't think this is a good thing. It's not a good match, or I don't like it. So on the other end, the vendor who wants to put an ad with me, they get value because they get exposed to thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. And I get a certain amount of value because I get paid for it. And also I kind of enjoy it. Doing the ads, my hobby. But I don't do many because I rather talk about my own stuff. But anyway, back to affiliate marketing and WordPress, sure, if that is what you want to do, right? It's a different game when you're a content creator versus an app creator or coder. It's a different game. So think about that. Hi from Morocco. There's another place I really want to visit. Yeah, that's for sure. South Africa, cool place again. There's so many places to visit in this world. Eh? The Def, advice on me studying Haskell and functional programming in general. I'm already imagining coding PHP in a functional way. You know, I have an expression, one of my many expressions, the more you learn, the more you earn. I don't know if I invented that or I got that from somewhere, but whatever the case, it's true. So if you learn functional programming, it's just going to add to your skill set. The more skills that you add within the context of anything really, but within software development, the more it's going to expand your mind. So now that you know functional programming and you know, I assume you know object-oriented programming and procedural programming, you can start to see when one style will make sense given a project versus another style, which would just make you a better programmer all the way. It's kind of like mixed martial arts, MMA. Sometimes you want to strike with your hands, sometimes your feet, sometimes you want to take them to the ground, sometimes you want to submit, sometimes you want to ground and pound. To be aware of your options just makes you a more well-rounded and formidable fighter, right? To be aware of all your options as a developer makes you well-rounded and formidable as well. So that's cool. Hi from Turkey. Hey, there you go. Or just go for AdWords. You know, it depends. You have to check. You know, I've done AdWords. Sometimes AdWords versus doing affiliate marketing. You could do both perhaps. What you want to do ultimately is A/B test. So let's say you do it through blogging, traditional blogging, writing articles, putting in ads. You could put AdWords, you could do affiliate marketing, you do both at the same time. Maybe you do A/B tests where you do five posts where it's just affiliates, and 5 posts where it's just AdWords, and 5 posts where it's a combination of the two. And you see where the 5 is a small sample size, maybe 10 articles might be better per shot. And this way you can compare and see which one produces the best outcomes for you. You know, you have to look at that. Yeah, so here we go. Miami. Hey, Adrian, how are you? I'm actually thinking of maybe buying something down in Florida. I've been talking about that for a long time. I used to rent condos in South Beach. I would rent a place right in the middle of it, and then I would stay about a month. But it's a bit too partyish for me. I think I'm going more up north, but which is very common. If you don't know, well, a lot of you don't know, you're probably not from Canada. A lot of Canadians in the eastern Canada, where I'm from, because it gets so cold here, a lot of us go down to Florida for the winter, 4 or 5 months, simply to get away from the cold. And in fact, I think that Quebecers, where I'm from, the province of Quebec, we make up, you know, sometimes only 3 to 5%, 3 to 4% of the Florida's population in the wintertime. 3 to 4%, something like that. It's crazy. You can buy French language newspapers that are published up in Canada, in Quebec, published in Florida. Like they're in Florida daily, which amazed me years ago when I saw that. Is Django worth to learn in 2020? Why not? You know, all the modern web frameworks, whether it be Django, whether it be PHP Laravel, you know, C#.NET with the Microsoft stack, everything except for Ruby on Rails, it's just worth learning. All right, that's enough with that. Okay, let me just jump into the subject. We got 70 people. So I want to show people, I make fun of Ruby here just for fun. I want to show you that years ago in, I guess it's 2015. What's this? Yeah, in 2015, I decided to look at the possibility of writing the new StudioWeb in Ruby here. And as you can see it here, we started writing a lot. So we had a lot of the back end done. And you see the Ruby code base had about 11% Ruby. Well, most of it was JavaScript. But we were writing a lot. And I had a guy doing it. I decided to pull the trigger on it because a friend of mine was like, come on, let's do it in Ruby, let's do it in Ruby, let's do it in Ruby. I was like, I don't know. Anyway, so we started doing it in Ruby. And then when we started hitting some minor roadblocks. And it could have been done in Ruby, but I decided to stop it because it's just that it was hard to find Ruby programmers. It was harder to find Ruby programmers. And I didn't want to have to deal with that issue as Ruby devs became more and more scarce. But anyway, I thought some of you would find this interesting, that yes, we were doing it in Ruby, and Ruby would have done a good job of it, there's no question. But it was just a scarcity of coders. So I decided against it. Anyway, let me go back here. Hi, Stefan. What do you think are the reasons for Ruby's decline? I think it comes down to, and as I argue, you can find articles I wrote on Killer PHP years and years ago, 2006, 7. And I think it's that Ruby's strength was not, I would argue, wasn't the language itself. It had some nice things about it where everything is an object, even an integer. You know, if you typed in the number 6 and you hit the period, it's an object. Whereas in other languages, you would have to turn it, like in Java, you would have to cast it to an object at the time. Anyway, so it was very elegant in that way, the language, but the language was dog slow. And I know these days they say runtime speed is not nearly as important as write time speed, meaning, you know, computers are so fast that you don't have to worry about speed at runtime for the most part. We're not all building Instagrams and Facebook here, right? That being said, back six years ago, it was more important runtime speed. But I think it declined because it was not, the language itself had holes in it in terms of libraries and stuff, but it wasn't significantly better than competitors. It was better in some ways, and of course Ruby lovers will say, no, I like it so much better. But it wasn't better enough. It wasn't better enough. Like, for example, at the time, PHP people were feeling that Ruby was going to eat their lunch. PHP was the dominant scripting language for the back end at the time. And you know what? For the back end, it still is the most widely used. And at the time, I remember, you can go back to Killer PHP, I wrote about it. PHP is just so dominant. It's not the syntax of the PHP language is not as elegant compared to Ruby. But I think the main reason at the end of the day Ruby had risen so fast was because of Rails, the web framework. The language itself is fine, but it was because of Rails. And then other developers from other communities, from the Python community, from the PHP community, and they looked at Rails and they said, hey, that's some good ideas there. So Rails had a huge impact in terms of web application development, generally speaking. But it could be reproduced in any of the other languages, right? So like I remember back in the day, we're going back 2007, 2006, something like that. And I was looking at, we did develop, I think we developed one application. It was a client-side app we developed with Ruby. And it was a command line application that checked whether sites were online or offline. And we did it in Ruby, and it was great. It worked fantastic. But again, Ruby didn't bring anything so revolutionary that it was worth dropping something you're already comfortable with. At the same time, Python rather, which was really, Python and Ruby were butting heads of two communities. And there's some significant differences in how they handle things. Like I actually prefer the way Ruby terminates methods, functions with the end statement. I don't like the line breaking that they do in Python, but that's just me. But they were kind of head to head in terms that they're both very functional, very usable languages, very easy to read syntax. But because for whatever reasons, Python was widely adopted in the academic community, which led to being adopted into the AI world, and Ruby didn't get that traction. And then when Ruby tried to get into the web space for small website development and medium-sized website development, they hit the PHP wall. And one of the reasons they hit the PHP wall is that PHP is just so easy to implement. Like you can get your PHP app up and running. Back in those days, it was a pain in the butt to configure Ruby to actually do something. So if you wanted to build, just implement a quick one-page shopping cart with PayPal, you could do it super easily with PHP, even a beginner coder. But a Ruby person, you had to learn Rails, and you had to install Rails, you had to configure it, and it was a real pain. Whereas PHP, just upload a page. That was it. So there was that barrier to entry, I think, but didn't help Ruby as well, vis-a-vis because of Rails. But in of itself, it's a good tech, but it's just not good enough. So it's still around. You know, they built super successful applications in Ruby and Rails. It's still, I think Instagram, if I recall, is Rails based, and I think part of Shopify. So it works. But, you know, so does PHP, Facebook, you know, WordPress is PHP, Java, you know, you have examples in that with LinkedIn. Instagram, I think, is, yeah, I always forget. I think Instagram, it's either Rails or it's Django, I'm not sure. But anyway, you got examples, my point is, of ultra successful applications, regardless of the framework and all the different frameworks. So I wouldn't get too concerned about that. I do the whole Ruby joke thing simply to make fun of people who get caught up in all that. Because in my career as a developer, as people know, especially the last couple of years as a freelancer, I'd walk into a project and I would choose a tech based on the needs of the project. Sometimes a project would require Java. Sometimes I would write something with C#. Sometimes I write something PHP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I still remember the gig, the job, the first job where I was in my Java zealot days. All I would do was Java. And that's all I cared. Java was the best. And you understand, at that time, Java was the upstart language. Java was the cool new language in town. But it was well established at this point. And it had a huge set of advantages over the competitors in many regards. And it just worked was one of the main things. Java worked. And I would always just try to do everything in Java. I go see a client, we should do it in Java, we should do it in Java. And one time I was forced by the client, who already had invested in a PHP, and this was old PHP. This was a PHP 3.0, really garbage PHP. Nonetheless, they said, we're not bringing in another language. We're going to we want to add feature functionality, and we want to do it in PHP. So I said, okay, whatever, we'll do it in PHP. I was forced to do it. So I'm learning. So I learned PHP. It took me a couple hours, because I knew Java and I knew JavaScript and I knew a bit of Perl. And once you know a few languages, to learn a new one is really easy. So I'm learning PHP and I'm working with PHP, and it was really like, I remember like holding my nose, like, oh, this is terrible. Oh my God, no error, no proper error trapping, and it's not object oriented. It's kind of half-baked object-oriented. Oh, it's terrible. I couldn't stand it. The syntax was like, oh, these dollar bills. I couldn't stand it. But as I started writing it, I realized it was just very, very productive. It was like you could just, you'd write one line of code to do something. It would take a page of code to do the equivalent with Java and servlets. So it had its advantages. Anyway, so I built the app, stuck to tried and true software development principles, modular code, clean code, objects or libraries would have don't do many tasks, you know. So anyway, all those principles that I teach, and it worked well. It worked well, so it was fine. So that opened my eyes to the fact that you got to choose a language depending on the job at hand. And then I would walk in, and I would not, when I became really a high-level coder, I think, is when I crossed that threshold, and I didn't think in terms of languages. I just thought in terms of what needed to be done for the job, and I would just choose the language based on the job. And oftentimes, I would learn something as I needed. It was no big deal. So when I make fun of Ruby and I go, I don't use Ruby, I'm kind of making fun of people who care about these things. It shows you're kind of like a junior mid-level programmer when you're a zealot about a particular tech. All right, Rob Burns, can you explain the difference between procedural and functional programming? You know what? I haven't looked at functional enough to be able to give you a definitive answer on that. I've done a lot of procedural, and then I jumped to object-oriented. I would have to look at that. I've never had a need. I see functional programming as a specialized type of programming. Most people are going to be writing OO-based code. So I would have to look into that. Hello from the Netherlands. Hello from Canada. So I hope I answered that question with regards to Ruby's decline. It was good, but not that much better. It has some significant holes in it, and its main advantage was Ruby on Rails, which was a framework which all the other competing technology, Python came out with Django, their version, and you got PHP, Laravel, CodeIgniter before that, which wasn't nearly as good. But Laravel, he literally, especially the first version of Laravel, one of the things he copied was Rails. TechMaker. Hey, Stef, as far as web dev and mobile dev is concerned, it's clear which technology to use, but what about desktop apps are developed, how they develop, which language and tech? Well, that's it. That's what the web technology stack solves. We used to do everything specific to an operating system. So back in the 90s, Windows was by far and away the dominant platform. And so when it came to small business development, everybody was using VB because it was incredibly productive. It was incredible how fast you can write a piece of software with Microsoft VB, but it can only run on Windows. But it was incredibly productive. Drag, drop, add some code to give it some behavior, and bing, bang, boom, Bob's your uncle. You got an app. I'll give you an example. I was working at a very large organization, and I was brought in as a hired gun to start working on this project they were going to do. And it was going to be a desktop app for about 100 employees. It was specialized in one sector. Anyway, excuse me. Anyway, so they, the lead of the project loved Java, so they said, we're going to do it in Java. Okay, fine, we're going to do it in Java. So we started writing the Java. So this Java started being written, and a couple of months passed, and then he decided to leave. He put the project on hold, and then eventually 6 months later, he left. So we had done months of work on the code base in Java, months. And so this guy leaves, a new guy comes in, and he decides he's just going to do it in VB. And he wrote the thing in VB in about 3 days. 3 days. That's how productive VB was on Windows back in the day. But that's old news. Now, even Microsoft, everything's web-based. So if you're doing desktop, before I would do desktop, unless you're doing a 3D animation software, a heavy video editing software, something that requires that you really have to hook into the resources of the underlying computer, I would just do web-based stuff. Just do web, you know? I think PWAs now, I think they're supported natively on Windows, so that's where I would go with that. Ruby is here. Don't approve of your attitude, sir. Well, I respect your disapproval. What's the thing left to me, right and behind you? What is the thing left to me, right and behind? You mean the glowing thing? This thing here? It's a representation of my mental output. As it grows brighter, my mind is working faster. It's a light bulb. Uh, just so we're clear, nothing wrong with Ruby. What do you have to say about GPT-3? I think I commented on that recently. Um, yeah, it's cool. It's I think Microsoft has invested in that now, so you might see that being used more and more in gaming, amongst other things. As I said, anything that has to do with machine learning and AI, you're going to see it as assistive technology for the next many years, I think, as opposed to replacing. Well, they might replace people who serve drinks or something, but in terms of coding and development, it's going to be assistive. So that's where GPT-3 comes in. I'm not good at design. I basically purchase templates online and design backend accordingly. Is it worth to spend time learning JS framework and to become a MERN stack developer? What is your advice? Well, I would look at always the jobs, see what the job opportunities are. Depends if you're freelance or not. If you're freelance, that's a different thing, right? Then if you're freelance, you're more concerned about productivity gains that a particular technology might give you. If I was freelancing and if I was looking at a JS framework, which could be worthwhile just to save you time, I would look at Vue.js. But using templates, that's cool, man. You know me, I'm reuse, reuse, reuse. All right, 165 people online, not bad. If you like this type of subject, give me a thumbs up if you like this type of video. 18, any advice for 18-year-old as a 9,894-year-old senpai? 9,894-year-old senpai. I'm not that old. I'm only 169 years old. Yeah, my advice to you is to learn a few skills. The one skill you have to learn is staying calm and relaxed. That's going to help you in so many ways, in your coding work, in your professional work, your investing work, in your dating life. Learn to stay calm. It's a skill. You got to develop calmness. One of the ways I learned to do that in martial arts is to control one's impulse. When you get excited, it's because you have lack of impulse control, like getting excited or getting angry over something. You got to learn to control impulse. Like lifting weights, where you don't start off with 250-pound bench press. You start off with whatever you can do. You want to start with a little bit of impulse control training. One of the things I learned in Japanese martial art is that you have an itch. Let's say you have an itch on your face. Learn to not scratch it. Just like, even for 10 seconds, don't scratch it. See, some of you might be feeling an itch now. Suggestion, right? So learn to not scratch it. Why? Because you're starting to train your brain, starting to train yourself to not react, not to be impulsive, not to be, So learn to control your impulses, number one. Number two, as you're learning stuff, learn to be patient and consistent and calm. Patient, consistent, and calm. Do a minimum 20 minutes a day. And even if you're not feeling it, do 20 minutes of coding a day and just back away. If you, after 20 minutes, you're like, I can't do this anymore, then leave. You've done your 20 minutes. But at least you've done that 20 minutes to push the ball forward. One of the things I teach is that frequency of exposure, the more often you expose yourself to something, the more your brain and your body is going to adapt to it, change and form around it. Especially when you're 18, your mind, your brain is still forming, your body's still forming. So now you can train your brain. You can literally construct your brain to be more effective, a more effective tool for you as you grow older. Just in case you don't know, I studied psychology in university. That was my major. I didn't graduate, I'm not a psychologist, but I still keep up to date with certain aspects of it. So yeah, you want to start exposing yourself daily to good habits, like write a little code every day, even if it's just 20 minutes every day, but also give yourself some time off, Some days you may do an hour, 2 or 3 hours. Other days you may only do 20 minutes, but also don't code 7 days a week. Give yourself maybe 2 days a week off, 1 day a week off. Also develop habits, good habits of exercise. It doesn't have to be hardcore exercise, but just consistent exercise, daily basis, or at least 3-4 times a week. I'm telling you, this will pay dividends, especially as you grow older. And then also develop, and I'll leave you with this one, develop a habit of saving. Saving is huge. especially when you're 18, if you can develop a good habit of saving now, you can find yourself in a fantastic position in a very short period of time. People who retire early typically because they adopt some of the things I've just discussed, and they learn to save and invest quite young. If you do that, you'll be way ahead of the game, and you'll feel retired when you're quite young. Yes, it's true. I do have a video talked about that. Hello, Ahmed. I hope everything is good. I want to do freelancing in web dev. What do you prefer, PHP or Node? You probably find more work with PHP simply because a lot of people, a lot of small businesses have PHP infrastructures. So that's there. Yeah, I'll do a few more and I'll let you go because it's already been a half an hour. How do you get a job at a place where you don't know anything about the tech they are using? Learn the tech. Learn the tech. Start learning it. At what point do you find hiring others more profitable than if you didn't? At what point do you find hiring? Yeah, that's a good question. I talked about this many times. I did the math back in the day. The original StudioWeb, by the way, was a web design studio. Web apps more than anything else, really. So we develop apps. And I started hiring people. When I did the calculation, it takes 10 people working for you full time before you make the same money as you would if you're working on your own. So you gotta be able to scale to that, have 10 people working for you full time. Otherwise you're making less. Stefan, I started looking for jobs and I have no luck. I do web dev and MERN-Stack and have a solid project, provide a resume. People are saying learn PHP. What do you think? Yeah, always look at the job opportunities. Just go to Indeed.com or some other job sites in your area and see what the demand is. You're probably going to see the demand in Java, .NET, and PHP. I know young nerdlings love MERN because they're told it's so good. I'm telling you, all the modern tech, they're all competitive. They're, in terms of their technical efficiencies, if you will, they're all pretty competitive. At the end of the day, though, it could be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but if nobody cares about that technology, if there's no jobs, who cares, right? You gotta find, you gotta work, you gotta be cognizant, you gotta be respectful of the opportunity around you. You know, I'm sure people love JavaScript, people love ActionScript, Flash ActionScript, but how many jobs are that nowadays, right? Portal have opened the background. That's a Ruber portal, be careful. Yes. Right here, there it is. I thought one of the things with Rails was convention over configuration. Yes, that was one of the big things. It was like, I was a huge proponent of that. It's like, of course, you got to understand the history, and I'll leave with this little history story now. Get off because it's already 33 minutes. Back in the day, Java was by far the dominant language. Like, there's nothing close. Java is still huge and dominant, but it's not number one anymore, maybe number two. Anyhow, and in those days, everybody was going crazy in the Java community with configuration files. If you wanted to do anything, you wanted to set up Hello World, you had to fill out 5 XML documents, and it was just a real pain. Everything was configured. Like, everything had to be configured with XML. So it was the way people were thinking. It was very bureaucratic. And the reason it became bureaucratic is because they had this group of companies that got together to sort of set the, to set the standard for Java development. And there's all these big companies, BEA, WebLogic, Microsoft, Sun Microsystems, and a whole bunch of others. And of course, when you have 5 huge mega bureaucracies getting together, they, of course, put together a mega bureaucratic methodology of software development, which was total and absolute garbage. And it was so unproductive. And Rails and Ruby rose out of the ashes of many disaffected, many angry, frustrated Java programmers who found themselves with a once relatively light, nimble language to work with, with this huge bureaucratic mess of configurations. So when the Ruby on Rails guys put out Rails, they came up with the idea of, we don't need to have, configurations for everything. We can have conventions. There's certain things that we just do. We know what we should do properly. We don't have to set a configuration file, which sped up the development process quite a bit. So that is one of their contributions. One of the big Rails contributions to software development is convention over configuration. And I tip my hat to the Rails community for that. It's huge. Because let me tell you, if we went the bureaucratic Java way, I'd still be writing software that I had started 19 years ago. It just became stupid. Here we go. I used C# for 3 years, but I didn't feel like it fit my interest, automation and image processing. So I switched to Python, and it's great. Fantastic, exactly. You let the job determine what language you're going to use. C#, I'm sure you'll say it's a great language. But when it comes to automation, image processing, Python is greater in this situation. So it's all good. There we go. Thank you. Instagram is Python and Postgre. There we go. That's it. Yeah. What's Rails? I think Twitter was initially Ruby, right? Rails. They were having scaling issues back in the day. I don't know if they went back to it or they went off it. I forget now. Instagram should be Django. I think they by DHH is Rails though. I don't know. PHP in Laravel isn't bad. Yeah, I like PHP in Laravel. StudioWeb's, the main app is Laravel, and we use Vue. Yeah. You fook some delice. As an IT student, I'm going to build my career on only JavaScript. Is that a good idea or not? You're going to let the jobs determine that. And you'll find that, yeah, there's lots of jobs in JavaScript. And if you like JavaScript, fantastic. But my suggestion to you is like a good MMA fighter none of them will say, I just do boxing, or I just do striking, or I just do Muay Thai, or I just do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You have specializations, of course. You could be a striker-oriented, or ground game-oriented, or ground and pound-oriented. But you should be aware of opportunities that are out there, and you should just be a little bit more rounded. So sure, focus on JavaScript, but be open to different things that may come into play. You may find if you need to implement some sort of machine learning into an app that you build, you may find you're much better off to, for that section, use a little Python. Is this pre-recorded? No, this is live. Why do you think I have this? No. Of course it's live. Yeah. Because the camera is just high quality. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I spend a lot of money on this camera. It better be high quality. Jeez. Oh, just jack my exposure a little bit. All right, so let's go on. When I know I'm ready for freelancing. I'm building it. I talk about this so many times. I'll say again, I gotta get to my video FAQ. You're ready for freelancing when you've done the foundations, you've done your fundamentals, and then what you should do is go out there and do 1 to 2, maybe 3 freelance jobs for free. Consider it your stage work, your practice work, and you run through the process, and you're going to learn so much. And since you're not being paid to do it, there's going to be a lot more forgivable activity on your part, and you'll know then and then that you're ready. So that's the tip. What do we got here? I'm going through some questions. Jeff has to say something. JS is conquering all areas. I'm a fan of Python, but seeing the growth of JS, I have no doubt that shortly the field of machine learning will also be conquered by this language. JS has no limits. You could be right. And if you're a Python coder and you see there's a lot of jobs in JS, you can pivot over to JS in about a day So no worries either way. Web and native apps. Web and native apps. Yeah. Yeah, I think most apps can be done via web now, whether it be desktop or mobile. Uh, on rare occasions, you're going to have to go native, but I think it's becoming rarer and rarer because software is coming so fast. Greetings to the holy Chechia Habibi. I think he retired, right? Akram Azad. Stefan changed my life. He doesn't give advice. He gives prescriptions. I feed my family because of him. Well, thanks for letting me know. I appreciate that. I'm glad I could help. I'm glad I could help. Fantastic. You did great work. You're doing great work. Fantastic. Why is most of the big money software still Java, C#, and PHP? So why is most of the it's just popularity. Like I said, one of my uncles who used to manage huge projects for the Canadian government, $50 million projects, he gave me a piece of advice. He said, from an engineering perspective, he says, for a new technology to replace an old, he said it has to be 10 times better. It has to be significant. That means it has to be significantly better. How you measure 10 times, but it has to be really much better. And the reason you see Java, C#, and PHP still hugely dominant is because they've been around for so long. There's a lot of investment, business investment, intellectual investment, IP investment in these technologies. And the newer languages and the newer tech that's come up are not that much better, if better at all, right? So I don't see any of these things being replaced anytime soon. That's a good question. Ruby on Rails or Java Spring? Well, for small projects, believe it or not, I would probably lean Rails. Unless I heard there's a new version of Spring that is very fast, easy to develop with. I do not know. But even though in my heart, Java is like I have a lot of affection for that language because it made me a lot of money. But it's slow to develop in, unless they've improved Spring quite a bit. Dear, I will develop my own web. Then which type server need to my web? Well, if you're starting off, any simple server will be fine. As I said, servers are getting very powerful. Server-side software is getting very powerful. Networks are getting more and more powerful. Performance is becoming much less of an issue. PHP ini config is a nightmare. Also PHP PM. I think PHP is the reason why we need Docker. Never had such issues with Rails. What do you mean when you say PHP is easier to run? Well, to deploy PHP, you just upload a PHP page to any PHP-enabled servers. There's no config. Now, I think Rails could be easier now, but back in the day, I was talking about a story about years ago. To be able to run Ruby as a web app, you needed to install Rails, which required a lot of configuration to do, and it was a non-trivial task back in the day. I don't know what's going on today with that, but yeah, PHP ini, yeah, you're gonna have multiple INIs. Depends on how the server is set up. If you got a good VPS, they should be able to handle that for you. Like my VPS, I use DigitalOcean and I use another one. DigitalOcean is not managed. We have to manage it, but we use it for very small things now. And the managed VPS we have is fully managed by them. So they keep they keep Apache up to date, and they keep MySQL up to date, they keep everything patched. They keep PHP up to date. They make sure everything's running smooth, so I don't have to deal with that. Yeah, Rob, smash the thumbs up. Over 200 people, only 55 thumbs up. Come on, let's at least give me 100. I appreciate that. It's just good for the algos. All right, 45. See, if you give me 100, I'll stay on past 50 minutes. If I don't get to 100 thumbs up, I'm gonna have to sign off. I was gonna sign off at 30 minutes, but I'm already at 44 minutes here. There's a little blackmail for you. All right. I am currently working as a junior developer, unsure whether to double down in web development or go for DevOps. Any advice how to decide? Look at local jobs. And also, what do you prefer, DevOps or development, right? I think development gives you more flexibility because you could do freelance, you can do small projects, you can do your own thing. Whereas DevOps, you're probably looking at getting into more established businesses, bigger businesses, and so on. So that's my advice to you on that one. But ultimately, do what you like, you know. Hi, Step. Hope you're fine. I'm fantastic. I hope you're fine, Daniel. Now you even put a Ruby joke in the title. There you go. I'm trying to satisfy the audience, you know. How would you approach a company as a junior developer? I'm going to put out a mini course on this, especially for my mentoring group. What you got to do, you do your fundamentals, etc. You do a couple of freebie projects, so you develop some real-world experiences that you can show. And then what you do is you got to research the particular employer that you want to work for. The particular employers, if they're using Python Django, then learn Python Django, right? And make sure you can show them some Python Django work. And you indicate on the resume, say, listen, I learned Python Django because I saw that you're using Django, you're using this. Or if they're using Express.js, then learn a little Express.js. So you have to present yourself in a way that appeals to the company, right? That means show that you have the skills and you're learning to learn the skills that they need for the job. Apart from being a YouTuber and export business, what other businesses do you own? I would like to know. Well, I had it export rare fish, water purification products. We did some consultations there. I did distribution as well of fish-related products. That's way back in the day. It was my first business. Right now, I do several things. I own real estate. I have the StudioWeb business, SaaS, which I have schools that use all over the world. The YouTube thing was a hobby. It's kind of became a good marketing avenue for me. And I do sell courses to end users. A few other little small side things as well. I have an old, like I sold my hosting business book years and years ago, and it still pays me quarterly cash outs. Yeah, so now I started up something about 6-7 months ago, my mentoring program. I just threw it out as a pilot, and people really love it. I'm having a lot of fun with it, so I'm going to expand upon that. And that's going to be my focus, I think, over the next 6 months, in addition to other things. So I hope that helps. Largely, I do what I like to do now. Learning how to stay calm as a first advice above all the possible other qualities to develop, I think, is very interesting. I'm glad you like that, Kevin. Yeah. Listen, every time I got in trouble is because I got angry at something. So don't get angry. I learned that from boxing, by the way. That was one of the places I really learned it from boxing. Because in boxing, one of the things you try to do when you're in the ring and you're fighting somebody is you want to get them emotional if you can. Get them angry or get them scared or anxious. Why? Because when somebody becomes emotional, it throws them off their game and makes them more vulnerable. And I remember one of my business mentors, he ran a pretty big company. And I see him do it. People would come in to a business meeting and he would say some pretty salacious things to them to throw them off their game. And it worked quite a bit. He was like Trump on steroids. But it worked, you know. It's not something I did, but I would ask, why'd you say that? And he would make comments about people's wives and stuff. And then he would get into the negotiation because he wanted to see how they react emotionally. So one of the breakthrough things for me when I was boxing is I would get hit and it would get me frustrated. I'd start going really hard and I'd start losing it. Not too bad, but still. And I hit a new level. I remember my coaches compliment me on that. When you know, I would get hit and I would just stay calm and I would just stay focused and calm and work through it. not get anxious about getting them back right away. And that works in business. That works when you're learning how to code. That works in so many aspects of life. Indeed you do. Indeed you do. The quicker you learn to save and invest, the quicker you're going to find yourself financially independent. That's for sure. And it could be very quick, right? You could do it in a very short period of time. Hey, Stef, for desktop apps, I love to use C#. It's quick to write, versatile, and web apps can easily get connected, even integrated. Yeah, .NET, that's the power of .NET. .NET is on the rise here in Austria, lots of jobs and demand. There you go. Yeah, no, that's, and Microsoft, they make some of the best, if not the best, developer tools in the game. They've always been really, really good at their developer tools. That one can take advice is the greatest delusion. That one can take advice is greatest delusion. That one can, I don't know what that means. Je code. I recognize your code. What's the weird thing behind you? It's a mirror that blinks. Are you talking this thing? That's my giant light bulb. Is there any Python web development? Oh, because it probably blinks because when I'm moving like this, the camera is moving in and out of focus. So when it moves out of focus, you see the movement back here. They call that focus breathing. It's the lens is adjusting its focus, so it's creating the illusion of size change there. That's all it is. What if you're applying to 10 different places, each one using their own text? Well, yeah. That's what you got to do. You got to. It's work. It's work. Apple and whatever. It seems like jQuery has become obsolete thoughts. Well, jQuery is used behind the scenes quite a bit. Like I think Bootstrap they still use it, and when jQuery was all the rage, I was still telling everybody to learn vanilla JS. And even in my book I wrote, I mentioned jQuery. And in a 240-page book or 25-page book, I forget now, I think I put 2 pages on jQuery. And this is when jQuery was pretty big, because I knew back then that jQuery would fade like so many other libraries. It's just what it is. People move on. That's why the basics are key to everything. If you learn the foundations, the basics, your skill sets are evergreen. They have no time limit. Are there any Python web app framework that uses HTML and CSS for front end? Yeah, Django. I forget the other one, what it's called all of a sudden. What if you're applying, okay, I got that, let's go on. Have you heard of Jess E2E? Have you used it? I've never even heard of it, so I can say. Russian bot, hello. It's affecting elections. It seems New York City has demand for Java and Python at most. For web dev, I am from New York City. There you go. I hear it depends everywhere. I've heard in Germany, .NET, C# is very big. And India, I know that Python, PHP is big. It all depends where you are. Hello, I saw back in time 2 videos, one talking about DDDD and its usefulness in terms of time. Then I seen your sir kind of went hard on NoSQL. I am wondering why. No, I was just pushing back against the hype, that's all. I think still most apps are going to be developed with SQL-based databases. Nothing wrong with NoSQL. Hey, Stefan, can you save this live? Yeah, I think I will. I'm going to be ending this at 60 minutes, which is coming up pretty soon. So is test automation a good career choice? If you like doing that, but I think there's better money in development. I want to switch from Flutter, I want to switch from Java to Flutter. My company, big one, suggesting a free mentoring program of management believes in Flutter, it means something. Indeed it does, and at our tour, but I've been talking highly of Flutter since I first saw it. Was it a couple years ago or whatever it came out? what I do, and one of my jobs is as an ancient dragon nerd developer, I go out and I'll look at new technologies. I'll give them a look over, and I'll leverage, using my experience. I'll say, this is what I think about it. I'm not always right, but I'll leverage my 20 plus 25 years experience. I'll say, okay, this is where I think it's going to go. So I looked at Java. I looked at Flutter when it first came out. I think it was beta or something like that. I said, this is good tech. I think it has a good, possibly has some legs. And it looks like it does. Another one I liked right away was Vue.js, and that's growing in popularity, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any point of using JavaScript once you know TypeScript? I don't know. I don't know. When do you show us the view from your new balcony as you did from your previous apartment? I guess I could, eh? Hold on. Hold on. Yeah, give me a second. There we go. I live in the downtown core now. So there it is. Whoa. So there you go. You got a view of the downtown. All right, I'll end with the next couple. How to resist the solitude in coding prolonged hours in front of a screen is inhumane. Yeah, I can understand that. Some people like it, some people don't. That's why you get up, go for walks. At least I say do an hour a day. You need some exercise. Yeah, you gotta discipline yourself to get away from the computer. If you don't like it, what I would suggest that you do is you develop some skills, some resume, and then start moving into other aspects of the development world. Maybe you can get into architecture, you can get into design, marketing, sales. Develop your communication skills so that perhaps you could be the one who talks to clients and fleshes out the specifications, and then communicates with then you communicate with the back-end developers to so you in terms of developing the specification for the project. So this way you're not sitting in front of the computer all day. You're working with people, but your skills that you're developing now as a coder can come in very handy, very handy. And people who can speak to both coders and business people and bridge that gap of communication, they do very well. They do very well. They can do very well. That's why I say learn communication skills. Is it need we learn Unix now? It depends on the place you work. If you're working in a Microsoft house, no. If you're working another type of development company rather, yes. It depends. Depends. I say don't become a Unix expert unless you want to be a Unix expert. There's been a push towards DevOps, which is good, and server management over the years. DevOps becomes quite complex. Now you got DevOps jobs, and you have to be pretty knowledgeable of Linux, Unix, and to manage everything. But I think it got a little too far, and people are starting to realize that. So you're starting to see companies like DigitalOcean and others where they're providing interfaces so that developers don't have to become DevOps and server management experts, and they can just work on their applications as it should be, A few years back, it was like, oh, you have to learn all this stuff about Unix, and it was what a waste of time. For StudioWeb, we use a VPS. It's fully managed. I don't want to have to manage servers. I don't have to install packages. I don't have to configure all this kind of stuff. That's not my job. My job is to build my application. Unless I want that to be my job. And that's where it's going to go. So it's going to go one route or the other, But I hope that answers that question. Waxel will end off. How is life in Canada? I want to move there one day. Life in Canada is pretty low key. It's I think I describe Canada as North America's most, excuse me, I describe Montreal, which is the biggest city in Eastern Canada. Toronto's the biggest in Canada. Montreal's second biggest, like 2.5, 3 million people. It's Canada, Montreal is North America's most European city. Canada is kind of like an in-between the US and Europe in terms of our economy and our society. So we have a social safety net here. So people are on the street, but much, much, much less in Canada. But there's taxes for that. We have healthcare, but it's not universal. Like we still have to pay for, if you want to get your eyes fixed, you want to get your teeth fixed, you have to pay for that. But for medical treatment and stuff, you don't have to. Business-wise, in some ways, we're more pro-business. Some ways here in Canada because we have a corporate tax rate that is lower than the U.S. Our corporate tax rate is 18.5%, where in the U.S. it's higher. So, which is interesting. You know, it's a personal choice. Canada gets really cold. There's no warm places really, except for you go out west in BC. It doesn't freeze, but it's not exactly warm in winter. It depends. It depends on your personality, you know. It's easier to build a business in the U.S., much easier. But I'll leave it at this. At the end of the day, if you're middle class or lower financially, you have a higher standard of living in Canada. But if you're upper middle class and higher in the U.S., you have a higher living standard in the U.S. right now. So it depends where you are. U.S. is much more pro-business than Canada. Like the population, we have lots of businesses, of course, but business is much more respected by the general population in the U.S. than it is in Canada, generally speaking. All right, so how are we doing? All right, we've done an hour. So an hour is long enough. So many more questions, but that's it. That's interesting. Colder temperature is better for the brain equals cleaner code. That could be. That could be. Like fasting helps your cognitive capabilities as well, by the way. When you fast, your brain starts firing off better. I think that's because your brain's like, oh, we better get smarter here because we need food. So, you know. My only chance of being hot is going somewhere cold. All right, guys, I will let you go. Thanks for joining. If you liked the live stream, please give me a thumbs up. We have 228 people. Now that the school season is winding down, as you see, I'm doing more and more live, so I will try to schedule these on a regular basis. So if you like this live stream, give me a thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next one quite soon. And what I'll do is I'll leave you with my ASMR main water trip here, people like. All right.